Let me tell you what my deep research and basically vision is.
I hope there's Bigfoot. I don't think there is.
I'm not telling you nothing.
The aliens won't let it happen.
Happening now, breaking.
Bernie Sanders is angry.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
What are the tips? Give me some tips on how to work with Wes Anderson.
Be ready to speak very fast and very clearly, because that's definitely one key thing.
I will only tell the truth.
Until you and 6 kids you barely know in wet bathing suits have surrounded 9 chimpanzees outside of a Wendy's. You probably really don't know yourself, okay?
Yep. And we back.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to your new favorite podcast and the best in political, sports, and paranormal news coverage. I'm your host, Wes Anderson, and this is In the Shed. This is episode 85, so whether you're coming back for more or finding us for the first time this week, hey, thanks for tuning in. It is early Friday, February 21st, and I'm in the shed in the backyard of my home in Alabama. Also, I can hang out with you tools and talk about the latest headlines, stories, and rumors in the world of politics, sports, and the paranormal.
There ain't no reason things are this way. It's how they always been and they intend to stay. I can't explain why we live this way. We do it every day. Preachers on the podium speaking of saints, prophets on the sidewalk begging for change, old ladies laughing from the fire escape, cursing my name. I got a basket full of lemons and they all taste the same. A window and a pigeon with a broken wing. You can spend your whole life working for something just to have it taken away. People walk around pushing back their debts, wearing paychecks like necklaces and bracelets, talking about nothing, not thinking about death. Every little heartbeat, every little breath. People walk a tightrope on a razor's edge, carrying their hurt and hatred and weapons. It could be a bomb or a bullet or a pen or a thought or a word or a sentence. There ain't no reason things are this way. It's how they always been and they intend to stay. I don't know why I say the things I say, but I say them anyway. But love will come, set me free. Love will come, set me free. I do believe. Love will come, set me free. I know it will. Love will come, set me free. Yes.
A little bit of Ain't No Reason by Brett Dennen. If you've never heard that song before, go back and listen to the lyrics. Certainly a thought-provoking song and one of my favorites. I had a conversation with a friend this week. One of my best friends in the world and I were talking, and I was sharing with him all the things that were causing me stress and anxiety, the things that I was worried about. Are you a worrier? I have many flaws as a human being, and one of them is that I tend to worry. I worry about my future, my finances, my family, pretty much anyone that I care about. I worry about all the things that could go wrong for them, all the things that they don't have that they should. Every situation, stressor, I carry it all. I'm trying to get better at that, but I carry it all and I worry a lot. And I was having this conversation with my buddy, and I was just talking about a couple of situations. And he just finally told me, he's like, man, you got to stop anticipating negative outcomes of conversations that haven't even happened yet. You got to stop worrying about worst case scenarios. It's not that it's not important to be prepared, but you got to stop fixating on things that are outside of your control. You're not responsible for how people react to things, how people handle things, how people feel, or what they do with those feelings. You are responsible for yourself, your intentions, your actions, your words, and how you show up in the world every day. And it's not that I didn't already know that, but to be told that in the moment was so helpful to me in hitting the reset button, getting out of my own head a little bit, hearing from somebody something that I already knew to be true, but they helped put me in the right headspace again. They rerouted that perspective for me. Don't anticipate negative outcomes that haven't even happened yet, especially those that are outside of your control. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. I think that that's one of the ways that you can begin to find peace in the situations that you face on a day-to-day basis. So I just wanted to pass on that bit of knowledge to you, my people. I just wanted to encourage you not to feel anxious about the things that you cannot control, but do your best to control the things that you can and to show up the best version of you in each moment and every day. Lead with love. Be slow to speak and quick to listen. Be someone that brings light into the world and the relationships and the circles of influence in which you exist and operate. Do not be anxious. Do not be troubled. Certainly the world is a troubling place, and there's a lot going on, but there are a lot of good things happening too. A lot of good people. A lot for us to be thankful for wherever in the world you are hearing this. And if you are a person of faith like I am myself, it's okay if you are not. But if you are a person of faith, remember that the scriptures say to cast your anxieties on Him, meaning God, because He cares for you. Let's get to some comments and corrections from our last episode. Our humble little show is being listened to across the globe, 68 countries in total and counting. And that number has not moved. That number has been the same for quite some time. 68 countries, we grew to that pretty quickly, and we have not expanded upon it. So let me hear from a nation that I haven't heard from before. Qatar, where you at? American Samoa, tap in. Somalia, let's go. We are, of course, being listened to all over this great country of ours, all 50 states, but we are still continuing to grow in popularity worldwide. Our top 10 listener base currently looks like this. The United States is number 1 overall, followed by India at number 2. The UK, which has now passed Canada for the number 3 spot. Canada holds tight at number 4. Singapore has moved all the way up to number 5. Australia at number 6. France at number 7. China, you have slipped to number 8 overall. Mexico at number 9, and Germany rounds out our top 10. Malaysia, you've been as high as number 7. You've fallen out of our top 10 altogether, my Malaysian people. We're back making new episodes. New content for you, Malaysia. Come back to the shed. It's warmer in here than it is out there. I want to give a special shout out to our 9 new listeners this week in the Netherlands. Hallo, Netherlands. Or as I've heard them say it, Netherlands. I do my best. We're currently averaging more listeners per episode than ever before. Still true thanks to you somehow. We're still adding followers over on X. We're up over 11,000 over there now. You can find us there at In the Shed 4. You can also be one of the 37 or 38 people to subscribe to our YouTube channel at In the Shed with Wes Anderson 6670. Please support the show by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We would greatly appreciate it. If you keep supporting the show, I'll keep bringing you the news. If you subscribe, like, share, and review, we will keep growing this thing together. We've got a great show for you today, but first let's get to some listener emails. Our first email comes from Meredith from Jacksonville, Florida, who writes, Wes, will you be reporting on Doge and Elon Musk's government takeover? I'm anxiously awaiting. Meredith, you might be waiting a little longer. That's not how we do things on this show. We are a news show. We do cover the things happening in our country and all over the world, politics, sports, and the paranormal, but we do things a little bit differently. We don't focus on all the stories that you hear about on cable news ad nauseum. And if you turn them on, all you hear about is Russia and Ukraine. All you hear about is Israel and Hamas. All you hear about is Donald Trump / Elon Musk and Doge right now. I'm sure we will cover that story. We've covered the others in our own way. As things happen, I'm not saying it won't make the show, but we've got a lot on our news desk. As for Doge being a government takeover headed by Mr. Musk, I don't know that I really buy that, Meredith. I think that the courts will determine what is legal and what is not. Congress will still have a lot to say when it comes to governmental procedures and organizations, and we are blessed that we have checks and balances in this country. If you turn on CNN and MSNBC, that's what you're hearing nonstop. Is that Elon Musk is the real president and he's taking over our government. If you turn on Fox News, all you hear about is how much money he's saving our country. We'll wait and see what the truth is. We'll see how this thing turns out. We're like 20-something days into President Trump's second term. Everything that he does is not the worst thing ever. Everything he does is not beneficial or permissible. The truth is somewhere in between, as usual. Do my ears perk up a little bit at Elon Musk and crew's heavy-handed involvement in every step of this? Sure. But I'm not worried about him having my information. I already have a PayPal account. And hey, I'll give him my social security number, credit score, address, and middle name happily, if that's what it takes to undo some of the funding that absurdly gets run through governmental organizations and agencies and is fueled by American taxpayer money. So, you will wait a little bit longer, Meredith. But as things happen, I'm sure we will cover it on the show. Thank you for writing in. Our next email comes from JP from Washington State, who says, D.B. Cooper most definitely died in the jump. His parachute got caught in a treetop in an expansive forest. His body decomposed and was never found. I'm 100% certain. And no, you're not, JP. It's one of my pet peeves when people say they are 100% certain about something. It is impossible for them to be 100% certain about. Are you D.B. Cooper? Were you there? Did you find him hanging by the parachute from a treetop? I'm guessing the answers are no, no, and no. You may think that you know. It may be your opinion that he did not survive the jump. I happen to disagree with you. No parachute, no body was ever found. There was an extensive search. And though the FBI at first said that they believed that he did not survive the jump, they have continued to investigate it for decades. Again, if you haven't listened to episode 45 of the show, go back and hear it with Darren Schaefer. Darren is much more knowledgeable than I. He believes with near certainty that Cooper survived the jump, and I tend to agree. Your opinion is always welcome here, JP, even if I disagree with you. Thank you for listening and writing into the show. Finally, Jesse from Mississippi asks, NASA says we're going to get hit by an enormous asteroid in 2032 and that we're all going to die. Are you worried? Well, Jesse, I already told you. I already confessed at the outset of this episode that I tend to worry about everything. But this is not one of those things. No, I'm not worried about the asteroid colliding with Earth in 2032, and NASA did not say that it's going to hit us and that we're all going to die, by the way. I'm going to label that as inaccurate information. What NASA did do is upgrade the percentage of this asteroid hitting Earth from like 0.9% to almost 4%, a very big increase. A large jump there, which, is alarming. But in 2032, I will be 42 years old. Joe Rogan will be president of the United States. And this humble show that began in a backyard shed in Alabama, will be the #1 news podcast in the country. No, I'm not worried about it. I kind of hope it doesn't happen, but we got some time. And we'll put Elon Musk on it right after he gets done auditing the federal government. Thank you for writing into the show, Jesse. I hope Mississippi's treating you well. That's all the listener emails this week. If you have any thoughts that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air. All right, let's switch to this. Let's get to the news in the world of politics, and let's hit the headlines. But first, a word from our sponsor. In the Shed with Wes Anderson is brought to you by Armchair Anchor, your source for truly independent journalism. Armchair Anchor provides a weekly newsletter, articles, essays, interviews, movie, album, and book reviews, poetry, and more covering topics such as world news, politics, sports, faith, family, business, and the unexplained. Visit intheshedwithwes.substack.com where you can subscribe for just $5 a month for exclusive content. That's the price of a single Starbucks latte. Again, that's intheshedwithwes.substack.com. Armchair Anchor. Authentic community. Honest viewpoints. Constant curiosity. Given opportunity to soften Trump's blow against Zelensky, Rubio keeps swinging, writes Blaze Media. Meta approves bonuses of up to 200% for company execs as it lays off workers, reports Fox News. Judge declines to immediately dismiss Eric Adams' corruption case, delays trial, says CNBC. From NBC News, Hamas will pay full price for failing to return Shiri Bibas' remains, Netanyahu says. And finally, Fetterman staff quits amid frustration over just working on Israel all the time, and that is according to The Intercept. Our first story in the world of politics this week, USAID, CIA, State Department played role in first Trump impeachment, claims top reporter in America. How did USAID, the CIA, and the State Department each play a role in getting President Donald Trump impeached back in 2019? It's not some grand conspiracy out of an Oliver Stone movie, says independent journalist and University of Austin professor Michael Schellenberger. Instead, the author of Apocalypse Never, How Environmental Alarmism Hurts Us All, and San Francisco, Why Progressives Ruin Cities, who rather than surprisingly giving those titles started his career on the progressive left, alleged in a Wednesday report that they're all connected to the impeachment proceedings through a little-known, supposedly independent investigative news organization known as the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, or OCCRP. For those of you who don't recall the subject of that impeachment, indeed, it seems practically quaint and forgettable given the events that unfolded afterwards. Trump was accused of improperly pressuring the newly elected president of Ukraine, some guy named Volodymyr Zelensky, whatever happened to him, on a call to investigate corruption in the country involving certain American interests, particularly involving the Biden family. The impeachable offense was that there was a claim Trump was offering a quid pro quo involving congressionally approved military aid to Ukraine being released upon investigation of the alleged corruption. The administration argued that no such arrangement existed and the president was simply emphasizing that corruption, not a scarce commodity in Kyiv, needed to be addressed going forward. The impeachment was predicated upon the testimony of a CIA whistleblower who, as Schellenberger noted in his report, claimed to have heard from White House staff that Trump had, on a phone call, directed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to work with his personal attorney Rudy Giuliani to investigate Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. The whistleblower who triggered the impeachment was a CIA analyst who was first brought into the White House by the Obama administration. In his August 12, 2019 whistleblower complaint, the CIA analyst referenced an OCCRP report involving then-Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani 4 times. The OCCRP report alleged that 2 Soviet-born Florida businessmen were key hidden actors behind a plan by Trump to investigate the Bidens. According to the story, those 2 businessmen connected Giuliani to 2 former Ukrainian prosecutors, Schellenberger reported. The OCCRP story was crucial to the House Democrats' impeachment claim, which is that Trump dispatched Giuliani as part of a coordinated effort to pressure a foreign country to interfere in the 2020 presidential election, which is why the whistleblower cited it 4 times. And therein lies the long, deep rabbit hole that leads back to an opaque, relatively small, funding-wise anyhow, American government agency called USAID, which, as you may have heard, has suddenly become the Democrats' favorite, most high-priority federal agency now that the second Trump administration is looking at shuttering it and or folding its responsibilities into the State Department. In 2024, NDR, a German public broadcaster, was set to air a report on the supposedly very independent OCCRP. The documentary, which NDR worked on with other journalistic organizations, including left-wing American outlet Dropsite News, exposed that contrary to its claims of being an unbiased and unattached outlet, the OCCRP was dependent on U.S. government funding. Funding from where? You'll never believe it, but Schellenberger said that in the documentary, a USAID official confirmed that USAID approves OCCRP's annual work plan and approves new hires of key personnel. On December 2nd, Dropsite reported the story itself. A giant of journalism gets half its budget from the U.S. government. Between 2014 and 2023, the American federal government provided 52% of the money actually spent by OCCRP, and since its founding in 2008 has shuffled at least $47 million and committed $12 million more to the ostensibly independent nonprofit newsroom, Dropsite reported. Other Western governments, including Britain, France, Sweden, Denmark, and the Netherlands, or the Netherlands, have kicked in at least $15 million during the last 10 years. That's according to a tabulation of OCCRP's annual audit reports, cross-referenced with federal budget documents outlining disbursements. The review was conducted by a consortium of international news outlets, including Dropsite News, and is being published in conjunction with news outlets in Italy, France, and Greece. While OCCRP has consistently disclosed that it accepts some money from governments, including the U.S., the full extent of that financing has not been previously revealed. However, NDR censored its documentary because, as another one of its investigative partners disclosed, NDR faced pressure after U.S. journalist Drew Sullivan, the co-founder and head of OCCRP, placed pressure on the NDR management and made false accusations against the broadcaster's journalists involved in the project. This apparently included, as per Dropsite, referring to NDR's John Goetz as a potential Russian asset for taking part in the investigation. Schellenberger revealed that even despite the attempts at censorship, the results of the investigation were damning. The journalistic collaboration revealed that OCCRP's original funding came from the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs of the State Department, and quotes a USAID official who says Drew's just nervous about being linked with law enforcement, referring to Sullivan. If people who are going to give you information think you're just a cop, maybe it's a problem, Schellenberger noted. OCCRP does not operate like a normal investigative journalism organization, in that its goals appear to include interfering in foreign political matters, including elections aimed at regime change. Sullivan told NDR that his organization had probably been responsible for 5 or 6 countries changing over from one government to another government and getting prime ministers indicted or thrown out. Thus, Schellenberger said it appears that CIA, USAID, and OCCRP were all involved in the impeachment of President Trump in ways similar to the regime change operations that all 3 organizations engage in abroad. The difference is that it's highly illegal and even treasonous for CIA, USAID, and its contractors and intermediaries, known as cutouts, to interfere in U.S. politics in the same way. It was best summed up in an interview Schellenberger conducted with Fox News' Jesse Waters, where Waters summed it up ominously. USAID was involved in regime change abroad and here at home, more or less, if accurate. Now again, caveat lector, even though Schellenberger is not a MAGA acolyte, this still falls under the aegis of big if true. It also doesn't prove a collaborative effort if it's factual, merely that a CIA analyst, USAID and State Department grant managers, and OCCRP had similar ideological cants, an animus against Donald Trump, an interest in pro-Western Ukrainian government, and no compunction against acting as agents of regime change, including at home. Whatever the case, if you want to know what the fight over USAID is about for Democrats, it isn't about disengaging from foreign aid to needy countries, or Elon Musk having his way as an unelected efficiency czar, or anything else like it. It's about the fact that USAID is an organization designed around opacity and the freedom to pursue ideological goals without those goals being questioned by prying eyes who wonder where the money goes. Did it go toward President Donald Trump's first impeachment? The reporting seems to indicate a major organ of USAID and State Department funding was relied upon by a CIA analyst to make a case that the President of the United States should not be the president. So, if this is true, this should be a scandal. If it is true that the CIA and the U.S. State Department partnered with OCCRP to put together false reporting to be presented as credible journalism and sources to be cited in the impeachment of then-President Donald Trump, this is scandalous, maybe even treasonous. And I already know the emails that I will get after reporting on this story. Wes, you have become a conservative news talk show. You are the Fox News of podcasting. You are a Trumper. Hey, I've never voted for the man. I'm a registered independent, okay? I've told you from the outset of this show that I believe that we are a nation that needs both the left wing and the right wing in order for this beautiful bald eagle to soar. What I'm interested in is the truth. And I'll tell you that I trust the reporting method of Michael Shellenberger. I don't always agree with his conclusions. I don't think that he's beyond reproach. Nobody is. I'm not saying just because he reported it, it's fact. But he's an old school journalist when it comes to his reporting. What he goes after is where the evidence points. And in this situation, the evidence points to the fact that the CIA, the State Department, and USAID had connection to OCCRP, whose alleged false reporting about Donald Trump's call with President Zelensky was used as critical evidence in his first impeachment. Now, this is certainly correlation. It's not necessarily causation. Without further evidence, it's not necessarily definitive proof of conspiracy, but it certainly shows you that when it comes to USAID and the operations and the organizations that they were funding, there were some things happening that American taxpayer money has no business funding. And to me, the bigger problem is not that, hey, they're meddling with our government, although that's a big problem if it was happening. The bigger problem is that we see this as an issue because it happens here, and it's all right that we do it all over the world. I don't think so. In my estimation, playing games with the governments of other nations is a dangerous game. It's a game of Jenga where you don't want to be holding the block when the tower tumbles. Too much is at stake and the risks are too big to be nation building all over the world. It's time to get out of that business. And look, USAID also funded a lot of legitimately charitable causes. They fed a lot of hungry children. They took care of a lot of refugees. They did things that we still need to do as a country. I'm all for those things being funded once again. But too much of this was going on as well. Propping up newspapers all over the world, news organizations all over the world that were labeled as independent and were really little more than propaganda machines paid for by you and me. The irony here is that the reporting that I just shared with you is not from right-wing sources. The news organization that broke the story is left-leaning. The article that I just read to you is written by a progressive, but they're people who are interested in the truth and who want dark money out of politics, who don't want to see the taxpayers' hard-earned money used to do things all across the world and even at home, clandestine activity that is at least immoral and maybe even worse. I do believe at the time that President Zelensky himself said that there was no problem with the call that Trump referred to as the perfect call. The argument could certainly be made that, of course, he would say that at the time when Donald Trump was president because that was a very important relationship to maintain. But there's no doubt that the Ukraine is no stranger to corruption. A mere few years ago, it was ranked very high on the list of governments and countries with the most corruption in them. Look it up. Even during the war against Russia, which Russia certainly started, Ukraine deserves to be a free nation. They shouldn't be overrun by Vladimir Putin. But even since that war has begun, Zelensky has folded up competing political parties. He sent certain Christian denominations packing. And because it's wartime, they're unable to have elections. His term ended, I think, May of last year. The irony is that the thing that Donald Trump was impeached for, and I don't know that he didn't do, maybe he did, I wasn't on that phone call. Maybe there was a quid pro quo situation. But the thing that he was accused of, Joe Biden openly and readily bragged about to reporters. It's a wild clip. I don't know if you've seen it, but he sat in front of reporters and told a story about when he was vice president. And he went to Ukraine and he demanded that they fire a certain prosecutor that he alleged was corrupt. They said they wouldn't do it. And he said that we're not giving you the money that Congress approved for you. And they said, sir, you can't do that. Only the president has the authority to do that. He said, call Barack and ask him. And then he said, by God, the prosecutor was fired. That sounds a lot like quid pro quo to me. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. So if the reporting in this story is accurate, if there was any level of cooperation between the State Department, the CIA, USAID, and OCCRP, it's despicable behavior. It's prosecutable behavior. It's election interference. And hey, maybe it's not accurate reporting. Maybe there is no causation here, no connection here. Maybe it's just an example of improper funding given and provided for by a bloated government. And if that's the case, then we need to continue to unravel that bloated government. Get Dr. Now in here. Let him put us on a diet. Other than Fox News and this show, where are you seeing this story reported? It was broken by progressive news sites, including the article I just read you, but where are you seeing it reported now? Only in conservative circles. Only in pro-Trump circles. And it shouldn't be that way. Wherever the evidence points is where you should go. Truth should be what you're after, not what makes your party or your candidate look better. And Republicans, you have no ability to sit on your high horse. There's plenty egg on your face. There's plenty of problems within your own party. But this seems to be a problem within our government and intelligence agencies itself. It's something you should know about. Our next story in the world of politics, drug cartels have become Mexico's 5th largest employer. Some 175,000 people now actively work for Mexico's smuggling cartels, according to a shocking new estimate that would make them the country's 5th largest private employer. The cartel's secret is their viciously efficient ability to recruit, said Rafael Prieto Curiel, who led the researchers, and who said the cartels are the country's top recruiter at more than 350 new people each week. That helps them counter their massive losses thanks to arrest, killings, and dropouts. Cartels, they need to have roughly 175,000 members. They cannot be much smaller because they would have collapsed. They cannot be much bigger because they would have grown so fast, Mr. Prieto Curiel said. So they have to be roughly 175,000 members, which means roughly, just to put it into context, the 5th largest employer in the country. He and his fellow researchers used computer models to peer into the country's notoriously secretive cartels, running millions of permutations on the 150 different cartels, evaluating their recruiting and losses to arrest, killings, and dropouts. He called recruiting the secret of the success to a cartel. Mr. Prieto Curiel delivered his findings at the Falling Walls Science Summit of 2024 in Berlin in November. A video of his talk was posted to YouTube on December 19th. The calculations come amid a widening war in Mexico between factions of the Sinaloa cartel, which began in September. It has now claimed more than 500 lives and another 500 have disappeared, according to local news reports. President-elect Donald Trump has vowed to take a heavy hand with the cartels. That includes designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations and potentially tasking the U.S. military to conduct some counter-cartel operations. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has bristled at those ideas, calling them interference in her nation's affairs. "We collaborate, we coordinate, we work together, but we will never subordinate ourselves," she said. Hey, try not subordinating yourselves to the cartel. Maybe that's where you should start. I digress. The cartels have their hand in drug manufacturing and smuggling, money laundering, sex trafficking, human smuggling, and other assorted mayhem. During the Biden border surge, experts said that income from moving people across the border topped even their income from drugs. U.S. officials also blamed them for the epidemic of fentanyl deaths, saying the cartels have taken over the production and smuggling business after Chinese syndicates were pushed out of the business in the last decade. Cartels field private armies that can go toe-to-toe with and in many cases outgun the police. Mexico has struggled for answers, waffling between confrontation and conciliation. Mr. Prieto Curiel's work explores how things have deteriorated in recent years. He said the rate of murders almost doubled from 2012 to 2022, and over the next 5 years is slated to rise another 42% according to his modeling. A massive law enforcement push to double arrests of cartel members could drive down the numbers of cartel members and reduce murders, but even then the total number of slayings would tick up compared to 2022. Finding a way to cut cartel recruitment in half would show real progress, reducing murders by a quarter compared to now. And an unthinkable end to all recruitment would cut murders by more than half, bringing the rate below the 2012 figure. Still, in this scenario, Mexico would be more violent in 5 years than any country in Europe, said Mr. Prieto Curiel, who used to work for the police in Mexico City. He said poverty and inequality in Mexico fuel cartel recruitment, but he said that media aggrandizement of cartels also matters. He pointed in particular to a Netflix drama, Narcos, which Mr. Prieto Curiel said portrays a cartel figure as a hero. And it was a fantastic show. I really enjoyed Narcos. And I really enjoyed Narcos Mexico. And I learned a lot. I'm just saying. Mr. Prieto Curiel says cartel membership grew by 60,000 people from 2012 to 2022 to reach the 175,000 level. That puts it ahead of Pemex, Mexico's major oil company, and slightly behind Walmart with roughly 200,000 employees, according to ZME Science. The publication, which interviewed Mr. Prieto Curiel at the Science Summit in Berlin, said that Jalisco New Generation Cartel accounts for about 18% of the active 175,000 cartel members. Sinaloa's factions combine for another 9%. La Nueva Familia Michoacana has another 6%. Noroeste has 4.5%, and Union Tepito has 3.5%. And they just lagging behind. You got to step up your recruitment, Union Tepito. That still leaves nearly 60% spread among more than 100 other cartels. ZME Science said Mr. Prieto Curiel also calculated that 60,000 cartel members died over the 10 years from 2012 to 2022. Another 60,000 have been incapacitated. So, Mexico is a nation in turmoil. They really are. They're a nation in turmoil because they have a civil war going on within their borders between cartel groups and even different factions of the same cartel who are at war for influence, power, regional territory, and money. And I learned all of that from Netflix's original series, Narcos. It was a great show. It's not a great reality. The cartel is out here adding 350 new members a week. They're out here recruiting like Nick Saban. They're becoming the new Walmart. They're the new Costco in Mexico. Costco with machine guns, cocaine, fentanyl, and engaging in human trafficking. The wholesale goods that they're offering are not wine and cheese. And if you keep up with the news at all, you might remember seeing during the election season in Mexico this last time how many political figures who were running for office were assassinated. Some of them in broad daylight assassinated. at levels that we have never seen before in that country, a country that has a history of these things happening. And they are the country that we share a southern border with. We talked about the fentanyl epidemic on our last episode, episode 84. Even bottlenose dolphins in the Gulf of fill in the blank are testing positive for fentanyl. It's out of control. And while we need to address the addiction crisis and the desire for the drug in our country, certainly, we also need to address our borders, and we need to have a plan in place to deal with the cartel. And for President Scheinbaum to say, we work together, but we will not be subordinate, it rings hollow. You ought to take your country back. You ought to provide your people with peace. And it's a tall task, but you ought to ask America for help. We ought to do it together. And look, I am a solutions-oriented individual. If nothing else, if I see a problem, I'll solve it. So here's my solution. Apparently, the thing that the cartel is best at, the thing that they excel at like nobody else on this planet, is recruiting and employment. So hey, why not offer immunity and a bigger paycheck? Bring those recruiters over here and sign them up to recruit for the U.S. Army. I'm just saying, the U.S. Army can't get anybody to sign up. Our numbers are in the toilet. Nobody wants to join our armed forces right now, so hey, go find those awesome recruiters from the cartel and have them recruit for the Army. Or have an SEC football team scoop them up, because we like to recruit down here too. Take those people who are employing thousands in the cartel and stick them in temp agencies. Put a sign on their desk that says assistant to the regional manager. And let's work this thing out. It's a problem. I'm making jokes, but it's a serious problem. The cartel is now the 5th largest employer in the nation of Mexico. The cartel is the new Costco. Our next story in the world of politics, Governor Shapiro to Ellen Greenberg's family. Lashing out isn't going to change the evidence. Facing sharp criticism from Ellen Greenberg's family and their private detective, Governor Josh Shapiro Thursday gave his most extended comments on the case since serving as Pennsylvania's Attorney General. Some may feel that lashing out in the media is helpful to their cause. I'm not going to stand in judgment of them, Shapiro said in response to a reporter's question on the case while at an unrelated child care press event. There are parents who are grieving and who are anguished, the governor continued, referring to Joshua and Sandy Greenberg, Ellen's parents who raised her in the Harrisburg area. Ellen was found dead of 20 stab wounds at age 27 in the Manayuk apartment she shared with her then-fiancé on January 26, 2011. Lashing out isn't going to change the evidence here, Shapiro added. The governor's comments appear to be in direct response to harsh criticism leveled at him by the Greenberg family and their private detective Tom Brennan, as reported by Penn Live. Josh Shapiro could kiss my, I'll let you fill in the blank, for what he did not do, said Brennan, a former Pennsylvania state detective who spent more than a decade investigating Ellen's death for the Greenbergs. He should be kicked out of office, Brennan added of the governor. Asked by a reporter if he thought Shapiro's handling of Ellen's case was negligence, the criminal investigative analyst shot back, he should still be a township supervisor. Ellen's family has long believed Shapiro sat on their daughter's death investigation during the 4+ years he had it as Attorney General. Their renewed criticism of Shapiro came after the Greenbergs settled 2 lawsuits against Philadelphia officials over the handling of their daughter's case. These settlements have all but overturned the controversial suicide ruling in Ellen's death. Reached for comment after the governor spoke, Sandy Greenberg told Penn Live, "I'm not lashing out at Josh Shapiro. He didn't want to talk to us. We were dismissed by him. He didn't do anything in 4.5 years. I would like his office to come clean with all the evidence they collected." Shapiro's involvement in the Greenberg case dates to early 2018. Philadelphia lawyer Larry Krasner, whom the Greenbergs retained to review Ellen's death, had just been sworn in as Philadelphia's district attorney. Pressure to reinvestigate Ellen's death, which was initially ruled a homicide but was switched to suicide about 2 months later, was building due largely to the Greenbergs' ongoing private probe, which was turning up new evidence and leads. Citing his conflict of interest, Krasner turned over the case to the office of then Attorney General Shapiro. His office would have it for the next 4+ years. Here's how Shapiro described his handling of the case in his comments Thursday. "I inherited it as Attorney General. It was a case that was put on my desk after the city of Philadelphia ruled that Ellen Greenberg died by suicide, not by homicide. That was not my decision. It was made years prior. We looked at every possible angle." Shapiro said all the evidence developed by his office pointed toward suicide. "We received more evidence, more information during the course of our investigation that sadly didn't show what the Greenbergs wanted it to show, but actually rather pointed to more data, more information that pointed toward a suicide." Shapiro said it was the Greenbergs who asked him to relinquish the case, which then went to the Chester County District Attorney in 2022. Shapiro noted that that office came to a similar conclusion. "There was no evidence that supported homicide. There was no evidence that supported any sort of criminal charges against anyone else," Shapiro said. The Greenbergs' renewed criticism of Shapiro comes in wake of their settling 2 civil lawsuits against Philadelphia officials over the handling of their daughter's case. As a part of the settlements, the former Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office pathologist who ruled Ellen's death by 20 stab wounds a homicide, but then switched it to a suicide 2 months later, now admits that he was wrong. Dr. Marlon Osborne, who no longer works in Philadelphia, performed the autopsy on Ellen the day after her death. He cited multiple stab wounds by an unknown person and ruled it a homicide on January 27, 2011. After at least 2 meetings between Philadelphia detectives working the Greenberg case and medical examiner officials, Osborne changed the manner of Ellen's death to suicide on April 4, 2011, a ruling he now disavows but is powerless to change. Separately, the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office agreed as part of the settlement with the Greenbergs to conduct an expeditious review of the 27-year-old freckled-faced Philadelphia teacher's death. The ME's office did not explicitly promise to change the suicide ruling, but the Greenbergs and their attorneys are already turning the page and focusing on finding her killer. In his comments Thursday, Shapiro blamed the suicide ruling on the Philadelphia officials. "That's on them to explain why they determined it. That had nothing to do with the Attorney General's office," he said. But by the time Shapiro's office had the Greenberg case, the family's independent investigation had turned up key pieces of evidence that Osborne had cited in recanting his suicide ruling, as follows. Osborne indicated it's now unlikely that there were witnesses to fiancé Sam Goldberg breaking into the couple's 6th-floor Manayunk apartment after Goldberg returned from the complex's gym to find Ellen unresponsive to his door knocks and texts to let him inside. This came to light after the Greenbergs' probe re-interviewed apartment complex employees. Osborne said it's now in dispute whether Goldberg forced the apartment door open to gain access. These doubts arose after Greenberg's probe showed the swing latch on the apartment door had not been dislodged. Osborne said there's evidence to suggest that Ellen's body was moved by someone else inside the apartment with her at or near the time of death. This is tied directly to the Greenberg's probe revealing streaks of dried blood on Ellen's face and elsewhere did not line up with the final position of her body. Finally, Osborne cited the findings of then Assistant ME Dr. Lindsay Emery, who in 2019 conducted a neuropathological evaluation of a 6-inch specimen of Ellen's spinal cord that was damaged by one of the 20 knife wounds she sustained. Emery found, "There is no hemorrhage in the spinal column that is pierced, and none in dura that has been pierced," according to her sworn deposition in the case. Asked by the Greenbergs' attorney if that meant Ellen was already dead when she received the stab wound, Emery answered yes. None of Emery's findings were released by the medical examiner's office. Rather, they were revealed only when ME officials sat for depositions in the Greenbergs' lawsuit in 2021. Sandy Greenberg said all of the evidence developed by their private investigation was turned over to Shapiro and his office. She said the office showed little interest in speaking with Brennan, the detective who produced it. "We brought everything to him," she said, but rather than results, the Greenbergs said they got the brush off. In his comments Thursday, Shapiro suggested it would be up to Chester County to determine whether to reopen its investigation now that the former Philadelphia medical examiner has recanted his suicide ruling. The DA there switched the Greenberg case to inactive status in late 2024. The narrative of suicide in Ellen's death was set moments after her body was discovered on that snowy, stormy January evening. It persisted for the next 14 years. During fiancé Sam Goldberg's recorded 911 call, he said among other things that Ellen had stabbed herself. Responding police and a medical examiner official also treated Ellen's death as a suicide. At the time of her death, the former graduate of Susquehanna Township High School and Penn State University was seeing a psychiatrist and being medically treated for anxiety. Apparently, assuming her death was suicide, police did not treat the bloodied apartment as a crime scene that evening. Ellen's body was shipped off to the city morgue with the knife still protruding from her chest. The very next day, Osborne conducted his autopsy and ruled Ellen's death a homicide. Detectives returned to the apartment the following day with a search warrant and a forensic team, but by then the place had been professionally sanitized, wiping away any potential evidence. The homicide investigation quickly floundered, and detectives began meeting with ME officials to argue Ellen had killed herself. This eventually led Osborne to switch his official ruling from homicide to suicide. 14 years later, that ruling has now been completely undermined. So, the case of Ellen Greenberg is one that is horribly sad and unfathomably tragic. But before we even dive into the details of this case and the holes that are so obviously present within it, first I just have to say that my heart goes out to the parents of Ellen Greenberg. I cannot fathom, I cannot imagine being in the situation in which they found themselves. And they have to be given exceptional credit for their tenacity in sticking with this and their insistence upon justice for their daughter who they loved. This is a case that is so replete with the mishandling of evidence, rush to judgment and lapse in judgment by law enforcement that it is staggering. It's staggering. This young lady was stabbed 20 times in the chest, in the head, in the neck, in the back of the neck, and in the spinal column, and it was labeled a suicide. Her fiancé at the time alleges he went down to the gym, and when he came back, the door was locked from the inside, and Ellen was not responding to his text messages or his pounding on the door, and he broke the door down to get inside. Where he found her, he called 911, and on that 911 call, he said Ellen has stabbed herself, which is a strange thing to say upon finding your fiancé with a knife in her chest and in a pool of blood. He also told police that someone was with him working out that could corroborate the fact that he had to break the door down. That guy later said, "Hey, I left the building from the gym and didn't go up to his apartment with him." It's obvious from the moment that they arrived, the police had made the judgment call that this was a suicide somehow, remarkably, and did not even investigate or treat it as a crime scene. And because they didn't, it was professionally sanitized. I guess by someone paid by the fiancé at the time. That's not suspicious at all. The next day, the medical examiner obviously ruled it a homicide, and then police got a warrant and came back, but every bit of evidence was gone. So over the course of the next 2 months, they met with the medical examiner's office, and somehow the cause of death got changed from a homicide to a suicide. The family hired an attorney to look into it, but he got elected and sworn in as the district attorney for the city of Philadelphia and had to recuse himself, and the case gets kicked up to the attorney general of the state, who at the time was one Josh Shapiro. Josh Shapiro's office had this case for 4.5 years and did nothing with it. The whole time, the private investigator quoted in this article turned up new leads, new evidence, tried to bring it to the police, tried to bring it to Josh Shapiro's office, who wanted nothing to do with it. Josh Shapiro just happened to be running for governor. Just happened to be positioning himself to run for governor during this time. It's also come to light that the parents of Ellen Greenberg's fiance made a donation to the campaign of Josh Shapiro. It's also come to light that an uncle of Ellen Greenberg's fiance happened to be a prominent judge in the city of Philadelphia at the time that Josh Shapiro was Attorney General. It also has come to light that Josh Shapiro went to the same private school as members of Ellen Greenberg's fiance's family. Hey, that's a problem. That doesn't look good. And for Josh Shapiro to say the things that he did in this article, the quotes that we just read to you that he said to the media just days ago, shows his character as a man who is absolutely feckless. I want to use stronger language, but hey, this is a family show. Because he lied. He straight up lied to say that there was no evidence showing this was a homicide. It's a lie. How can you commit suicide by stabbing yourself 20 times? How can you commit suicide by stabbing yourself in the back of the head and neck and spinal cord? How can you commit suicide when the assistant medical examiner testified under oath in a deposition that her spinal cord was severed, meaning that she died, and then was stabbed multiple times after her death? For Josh Shapiro to stand before the media and say that they investigated every angle and that all the data pointed to a homicide is a lie. It's a lie. It shows a total lack of morality and courage on the part of Josh Shapiro and reveals his character or lack thereof. Can you tell that I feel strongly about this one? I'm not saying that Josh Shapiro intentionally covered up this murder, although it's a possibility. I don't have the evidence to prove that, despite the ties that he apparently had to the fiance's family. What I'm saying is, more likely than that, is that it was easy for him to just go with what was given him, a case that had already been closed, a cause of death that was labeled suicide, and not do the hard work that happened to be his job of looking into it, because he was focused on running for governor and didn't want any bumps in the road. I think that's exactly what happened. That's at least what happened in this case. And it's despicable behavior. I agree with the private investigator. Throw the man out of office. His character is unbecoming of a governor. And if you've listened to the show before, you know I'm not somebody that brings race and gender into every discussion. But I have to in this case, because this is something that happens far too often when the victim of a violent crime is a woman. The police rush to judgment, that they take the word of the men involved, that they blame the victim, that they don't do a thorough job of investigating because they assume that this person was mentally weak, or asked for it, or made it up, or harmed themselves. If you've watched the Netflix documentary on the situation with Gabby Petito, you saw it in that case as well. When police responded to a 911 call from somebody that passed by and said that they saw a man slapping a woman several times in the face, they find the van, they stop it, they pull her out, they talk to her. She tries to take ownership and say, it was my fault, I started it, I was hitting him. And the police just took her word for it, separated them, and paid for Brian Laundrie to be in a hotel room for the night. Gabby Petito was dead days later. They assumed because she was getting treatment from a psychiatrist for anxiety, she must have committed suicide. Hey, a whole lot of us deal with anxiety. And talking to someone is valid and important. It doesn't mean that you're suicidal or that you're crazy. Mental health is health. And I can't imagine that if the fiance were not a well-to-do, well-off, middle to upper class white male, that he would have been given the benefit of the doubt to the level that this guy was in this case. That they didn't treat the apartment like a crime scene, didn't do their due diligence to investigate all the claims that he made to them, wouldn't have happened if he looked a little bit different, in my estimation. And I'm just being real. I'm just keeping it a buck with you. I call it how I see it. This is an unfortunate and tragic case that obviously was not a suicide. And the admissions that the medical examiner at the time, Mr. Osborne, who certainly is no saint, and this has probably been eating at him for years. The admission that he was wrong was one not made because of his guilty conscience or because it was the right thing to do, but only because the city of Philadelphia was sued. The medical examiner's office was sued, and he had to answer questions under oath. What do you do in Philadelphia? What do you do in Josh Shapiro? What do you do in police? What are you doing, Mr. Osborne? This guy was almost Kamala Harris's running mate. Do you realize that? This guy was almost a vice presidential candidate. And in fact, many people said, why did you not pick Josh Shapiro? If you had, maybe you would have won the presidency. Why did you go with Tim Walz? Hey, I think we know why. Because they did a background check. They looked into the man. They found this. They came in front of Kamala Harris and said, well, this might come up. And she said, I'll go with the guy that doesn't know how to load a shotgun. Why is it so hard for elected officials to just admit that they made a mistake? That's what a real man would do here. That's what an honest man would do here. He would call the family. He would look the media and the cameras in the eye and say, you know what? I was wrong. Upon further examination, the evidence clearly shows that this was not a suicide. I should have seen it at the time. I should have re-examined this case. I made a huge mistake and I will never forgive myself for it. I hope that authorities reopen the case, change the cause of death, and find the murderer of Ellen Greenberg. That's how a man of character handles this. That's what Josh Shapiro should have done instead of saying that the family lashing out doesn't change the facts. What a weak man. I will fight Josh Shapiro for charity. Greenberg family, you are in my prayers. I hope you find who did this. From the facts of the case, I think we have an idea of who the leading suspect is. Our last story in the world of politics this week. Texas medical school leader resigns after investigation revealed bodies were used without consent. The president of the University of North Texas Health Science Center is stepping down 4 months after an NBC News investigation uncovered that the center had failed to contact families before using their loved ones' corpses for medical research. In an announcement Monday, the University of North Texas System Board of Regents said it had accepted Sylvia Trent Adams' resignation. The 3-paragraph statement, which praised Trent Adams' dedication, integrity, and respect, did not mention NBC News' reporting or include a reason for her departure. And that's a bold way to go. To praise her dedication, integrity, and respect, considering the circumstances. I digress. In an email responding to questions, Health Science Center spokesperson Andy North said Trent Adams has indicated her reasons for this departure are personal. Trent Adams did not respond to a message requesting comment. I bet they were personal. Personally, she failed. In September, NBC News published the first installment of a year-long investigation into the Fort Worth-based Health Science Center's practice of chopping up, studying, and leasing out the bodies of the unclaimed dead, those whose family members often cannot be easily reached or whose relatives cannot pay for cremation or burial. Over a 5-year period, the center had received about 2,350 unclaimed bodies from Dallas and Torrance counties and used many of them to train medical students. Others it dissected and leased to outside groups, including major biotech companies and the U.S. Army, helping bring in about $2.5 million a year to the center. And that should be labeled human trafficking. That is alarming and astounding that they received $2.5 million from leasing the bodies of people who have died and gone unclaimed, or whose families were too poor to pay for a funeral. That's disgusting. This was done without consent from the dead, and in many cases without the knowledge of any of their survivors. Just days before NBC News' investigation was published, after reporters had shared detailed findings, the Health Science Center announced it was suspending its body donation program, firing the officials who ran it, and hiring a consulting firm to study the program's operations. AKA CYA is what they did. I digress. In emails to students and faculty, Trent Adams said the reporting had revealed a lack of sufficient controls and oversight of the center's willed body program, which she said had fallen short of the standards of respect, care, and professionalism that we demand. She said center leadership had been unaware, for example, that the body program was routinely shipping unclaimed remains, including those of U.S. military veterans, across state lines. Again, I say, That sounds, to me, just a man in a shed in Alabama, like human trafficking. You should not profit from selling human remains. In the days that followed, Trent Adams fielded several messages from concerned students, staff, and alumni, according to emails obtained through a public records request. In one message, a Health Science Center medical student wrote that they'd been taught that consent is at the forefront of the practice of medicine, but the NBC News' reporting had called into question whether the administration was practicing this in our academic anatomy lab. It makes me sick to my stomach to think that we dissected bodies without consent, another student wrote to Trent Adams. We referred to them as donors because that is what we thought they were, not indigent individuals who had no say in the matter. Many of those whose bodies were used by the Health Science Center were described as having no next of kin, but NBC News was able to quickly locate several families who were angry and heartbroken to learn from reporters that their relatives had been dissected and studied without permission. In October, the news outlet published the names of hundreds of people whose unclaimed bodies were sent to the center, leading more survivors to come forward. In total, reporters have identified more than 25 families who learned weeks, months, or years later that a relative was used for research. As additional survivors came forward, the Health Science Center said in a statement in September that officials were working to connect with families to extend our deepest apologies. You're going to have to extend a lot more than that. My guess is in the millions. Abigail Wilson was among those seeking answers. She learned from her mother's death and donation to the Health Science Center from the list published by NBC News. When Wilson and her family went to the center in October to request more information, she said a staff member told them that Trent Adams wished to meet with them. We sat there for 45 minutes, and the president of the university never came, Wilson said. Then they took our information to give to her, and she never called. The fallout continued in November when the Texas Funeral Service Commission sent a letter to Trent Adams ordering the center to immediately halt the practice of liquefying bodies, which the commission said was prohibited under state law. The center defended the legality of the practice commonly known as water cremation, but said it had stopped doing it on the day NBC News published its investigation in September. The Health Science Center had been receiving unclaimed bodies since at least 2019, 3 years before Trent Adams was hired as president following a career in the military. She previously served as acting U.S. Surgeon General during President Donald Trump's first term. Her last day at Health Science Center was January 31st. So, in Fort Worth, Texas, over there close to my guy Bigfoot Bob, shout out to the Bigfoot Club podcast, who is not associated in any way with the harvesting of human remains against the will of survivors, but it's a good show, and he lives in Texas. So, shout out to Bigfoot Bob and Sasquatch Steven over there. They were receiving bodies in Fort Worth, Texas at this university medical school and experimenting on them. That's what they were doing. They were experimenting on these bodies without consent. This is absolutely objectionable. And if it's not illegal, how is it not illegal? Because it should be. And it has resulted in the president of the university stepping down. Unfortunately, this is something that happens far too often when it comes to the bodies of deceased prisoners and the poor and of minorities. For profit, by the way. We've covered this extensively on the show. I don't know another podcast that has covered this issue the way that we have. We've talked about it here in my state of Alabama with UAB. We've talked about it at prisons in Mississippi. We've talked about it with the Uyghur Muslims in China. It's absurd that this would happen in our country in 2025. It goes against everything that we say that we stand for. It is the epitome of injustice. It's not just disrespectful to the families, but it's the desecration of a human body. And as I said, I think that it should be labeled as human trafficking because it's legal cartels profiting financially from the sale of humans made in the image of God. And it's really sad. Apparently it was happening 3 years before this lady became the president of the university, but hey, with her experience under the Trump administration as the Surgeon General, with her experience in the military, with her position as the president, she should have known what was going on in her organization. She should have been aware. And even if she wasn't, when things came to light based on this NBC News reporting, she should have been willing to meet with families or at least return a phone call. And apparently she was not. Don't tell me that I won't bring it to people on both sides of the aisle. Wherever there is injustice that we find out about, we will highlight it on this show. As MLK said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I feel bad for these families. Imagine finding out about this in regard to your loved one in the newspaper or on a news site. Maybe when you didn't even realize that they had passed away. You'd been trying to locate them. It's tragic and it's unacceptable. This is the second episode in a row that we're covering illegal experimentation on human bodies after they have passed away. Last week it was Ben Franklin's basement. This week it is a college in Fort Worth, Texas. It's always macabre. It's always wrong. It's always dark energy. And we reject it wholeheartedly on this show. We reject it wholeheartedly. So does Bigfoot Bob. Check out the Bigfoot Club podcast on Spotify. That's all the news this week in the world of politics. Let's switch to this, the news in the world of sports. And let's hit the headlines. NFL investigating allegations against kicker Justin Tucker. Nebraska football nixes home-and-home matchups with Tennessee. Yankees decide to allow players to grow beards for first time in franchise history. Saints to hire Eagles Nussmeier as offensive coordinator. Kansas basketball loses by 34 to unranked BYU, tied for their worst loss ever under Bill Self. Commissioners agree college football playoff seeding needs change. Joel Embiid admits knee is limiting him. And finally, the San Antonio Spurs are shutting down Victor Wembanyama for the season. For our first story in the world of sports this week, we go to the NBA, sort of. Judge who sentenced Michael Jordan's father's killer to life in prison is now asking for his release. The North Carolina judge who presided over the 1996 trial for Michael Jordan's father James' murder is now asking for the man convicted for the killing to be released, according to several reports. ABC News first reported that retired Judge Gregory Weeks petitioned the North Carolina Parole Commission on Tuesday, requesting that Daniel Green be released because of the omission of what the judge says was key evidence in the trial. Green was 18 years old at the time of the 1993 murder of James Jordan and was later sentenced to life in prison. James was the father of NBA legend Michael Jordan. A spokesperson with the North Carolina Department of Adult Correction Office confirmed with People that Weeks visited the department earlier this week, but would not comment on the nature of the visit. ABC and NBC News reported that Weeks made the request for Green's release after learning that a forensic blood analyst who testified during the 1996 trial had not disclosed that a blood-like substance found inside James Jordan's car might not have been blood at all. The NBA great's father was asleep in the passenger seat of his car when Green walked up to the vehicle and shot him dead during a robbery gone wrong, prosecutors argued during the trial. James Jordan's body was discovered in a South Carolina swamp 11 days after the shooting, according to the Chicago Tribune. Green has long claimed that he did not pull the trigger and instead was only a co-conspirator in covering up James Jordan's murder after his friend Larry Demery had asked for his help moving the body. Demery, who was also convicted in James Jordan's killing, testified during the 1996 trial that Green was the one who killed the father of the six-time NBA champion. In a phone call from prison, Green told ABC that he is overwhelmingly grateful for Weeks' petition asking for his release, calling the retired judge's request a significant factor that speaks volumes for his innocence. ABC reported that Weeks told the Parole Commission that he had never been haunted in such a manner as he was haunted by this case. Weeks retired from the bench in 2012, according to the Fayetteville Observer. People has reached out to Jordan's representatives for comment but did not immediately receive a response. Jordan's father's death deeply impacted the NBA superstar, who briefly left the league to pursue a career in baseball, a decision that he said was because of his late father's love for baseball and ambition to see his son play the sport. "I think about him every day," Jordan said of his father in 1996, according to the Tribune. "I'm pretty sure I always will, every day of my life." So, we are in that time when it comes to sports. The slow season. Football is over, baseball has not begun. We don't cover hockey on this show. Sorry, Canada. It's all basketball today. And so I bring you this article about the murder of Michael Jordan's father, which I found to be interesting, because the judge who sentenced the alleged murderer to life in prison is now asking for his release, and says he's haunted by the case. That's not something that happens normally. This is an outlier. I was 4 years old at the time of James Jordan's murder, but believe it or not, I was already a Michael Jordan fan. And I remember when he played baseball, when he came back to the NBA and won that first championship. The unforgettable scene. One of the most endearing moments in his fabled career, when he won the NBA championship and laid on the floor of the locker room hugging the Larry O'Brien trophy and sobbing because of the grief that he was experiencing at the loss of his father. 2 men were charged with this murder. One of them struck a deal with prosecutors and testified against the other. And this man, Mr. Green, who has always said that he was innocent when it comes to pulling the trigger, though he admits to participating in the crime to some degree, now appears to have some level of forensic evidence on his side. It's certainly interesting. If that evidence points to the fact that he did not do this crime, I hope that he at least gets a new trial. I hope that the evidence is brought to bear in court. It's certainly enough to question his conviction if the judge in the case says that he's never been haunted by a case like he has been this one. And I thought this is something that might be of interest to you, the listeners, my babies, my people, my tools, on a day in which our show has been very heavy. We've talked about possible corruption within our government. We've talked about the cartels in Mexico on a rampage. We've talked about Josh Shapiro looking the other way when it comes to a murder. We've talked about bodies being experimented on after their death. And now another murder of the father of the greatest basketball player who ever lived. It was a tragic event. This man certainly should pay a price for his involvement in the crime. And according to the evidence and the judge in the case, he might have done so. We'll keep our ear to the ground. We'll keep an eye on this one. It will be interesting to see how things develop. For our next story in sports, we continue in the NBA with NBA All-Star Weekend, where G League quote-unquote star Mac McClung wins his third straight dunk contest jumping over a car. He jumped over a car. Tyler Hero beats Buddy Hield for the three-point crown, and Shaq's OGs defeated Chuck's Global All-Stars 41-25 in a targeted score match, with Steph Curry, the hometown kid there in the Bay Area, winning the All-Star Game MVP. And I gotta be honest, to me, the only exciting thing about All-Star Game weekend was a couple of shots that Steph Curry hit in the championship game, one from half court, one of his patented step backs, where he turns before the ball even goes through the net, and him winning MVP. The rest just did not move the needle. Not to me anyway. This is the first time I can remember in my lifetime not tuning into the dunk contest. No longer caring as a shooter. And you know I am a shooter. D3 level shooter. My first time not even caring about the 3-point contest. The NBA All-Star Game used to be the most competitive All-Star Game in sports, bar none, even more exciting than the MLB All-Star Game, which apparently is the only one left where people even try. They tried to fix the NBA All-Star Game by having the guys from the NBA on TNT draft their own teams and playing 5-on-5 tournament style, which was at least an interesting idea. It was fun to see who picked what player and to see the matchups. The games were not exciting. The games were not competitive. There still was not very much defense played. With $150,000 on the line for every winning player of the winning team, with plenty of rest in between, in targeted score games where you only have to reach 40 points to win, it was somewhere between a bad impersonation of an And One Hoops mixtape tour game and a competitive game you might see at the local YMCA. It's just bad. It's just bad basketball. It's not even fun to watch. The players talk about how it's their job to put on a show for the viewers. Hey, I'd rather watch paint dry. I'd rather watch 5-year-olds play basketball. I'd rather watch high school soccer. That's the level that it has gotten to with the NBA All-Star Game because these guys don't care. They just don't care. There's no fixing it because these guys don't have the right mentality. They're not out there to compete. They're not out there to go head-to-head against the other best players in the league for supremacy and to show dominance. They're not interested in that. They just want a break. They just want to rest. They just want to goof off. The Harlem Globetrotters in 2025 are infinitely more entertaining and even more believable basketball than the NBA All-Star Game. The championship match between Shaq's OGs and Chuck's Global All-Stars finished in a 41-25 score. These guys were not competing. And LeBron James, the self-proclaimed entitled king, sat out of the All-Star Game with an ankle injury and played in the first Laker game 3 days later. Give me a break. I'm just over it. The stars do not compete in the dunk contest. They haven't in years. And we have a G League player who shouldn't even be competing. He's not in the NBA. Okay. We have a G League player dominating the dunk contest, winning back-to-back-to-back, thinking he's Patrick Mahomes out here because nobody who's a legitimate star will even compete, will even sign up. I'm just over it. I'm over it as a fan, as somebody who loves the product of the NBA, who loves basketball, who looks forward to this every year. There's just no point in watching anymore. It really is that bad. It really is that boring. I caught myself scrolling Facebook in the middle of the NBA All-Star Game. There wasn't anything worthy of my attention. There wasn't any can't-miss moments, okay? If I had DVR'd it instead of watching it live, I probably would not have gone back and watched it for very long. Maybe the first matchup. Not to mention one of the teams that was playing in this tournament-style contest was the Young Stars, the up-and-coming team. Hey, they're not NBA All-Stars. Might as well put a boys' championship high school team out there. Hyperbole, sure. But you get my point. I'm not an NBA hater, okay? I'm not somebody that always has something negative to say against the NBA, who's bringing politics in it, who makes it personal against stars that think differently than I do. That's not what this is about at all. It's just bad basketball. And there's nothing the NBA can do to fix it because there are no more Kobe Bryants. There are no more Tim Duncans. There are no more Michael Jordans. These guys just don't have the will. They don't have the mindset. They're of a different generation. They're not compete at all times, at all costs, no matter what. They're not the type of guys that see the All-Star Game as a unique opportunity for fans to come and watch the very best of the very best all on the court at the same time, where they put everything on the line to compete against each other. I remember growing up watching this game where you would have guys go head to head with other best players in the league who they don't normally get to see or guard or play with or play against, and they used it as an opportunity for bragging rights. They took East versus West very seriously. They took one-on-one matchups very seriously. They played defense, and it was exciting and unique and fun. And this is none of those things. It's incredibly disappointing that Adam Silver has sold out the NBA and giving away the media rights to somebody other than TNT. I think he went with Amazon. TNT offered the same price. The NBA on TNT is done after this year, and that is a travesty. It's a travesty. Shaq, Kenny, Charles, and Ernie have meant so much to the game, and they were honored at the All-Star game. Them picking teams and Steph Curry winning MVP, that was about all that there was. It didn't move the needle. What do you think? Did you like the new format? Am I being too harsh? Am I wrong? Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Find us over on X at intheshed4 and let me know. From NBA basketball, we go to college basketball, where the top 10 currently looks like this. Number 1 in the country, my Auburn Tigers. Florida is number 2, Duke number 3, Alabama number 4, Houston number 5, Tennessee number 6, Texas A&M at 7, Iowa State at 8, Texas Tech at 9, and St. John's, led by the Vampire, at number 10. Let's take it around the SEC this week. Number 2 Florida defeated Oklahoma 85-63. Number 21, Mississippi State took it to number 7, Texas A&M, 70-54. LSU beat South Carolina in the Who Cares game, 81-67. Number 17, Kentucky defeated Vanderbilt, 82-61. Number 15, Missouri scored 110 points in an upset of number 4, Alabama, who only scored 98. And number 1, Auburn beat Arkansas 67-60. Who would have thunk it, but SEC basketball is, bar none, the top conference in the country, and it is not even close. It's by a country mile. By an Alabama mile. 14 of the 16 teams in the SEC stand an absolute chance of making the field of 68 in March Madness. That is absolutely incredible. It's absurd how good and how deep and how tough this conference really is. But this is how I see it. I think that 3 teams stand ahead of the rest of the pack in the SEC, and that's Auburn, Florida, and Missouri. Auburn has been the number 1 team in the country going on 7 or 8 weeks now. They're deep, they're experienced, they have good guard play, they're good in the front court. They're coached by a tremendous coach in Bruce Pearl. They play good defense. They can knock down threes. They score in a variety of ways. They've proven they can win games in and out of conference at home. They're undefeated on the road in the SEC. They've won games that are low scoring and close. They've won high scoring games. They're on that top tier. Along with them are the Florida Gators, who've already beaten Auburn, who have probably the best front court in the league, and who are a mismatch from top to bottom with a lot of teams in the country. A lot of top teams just don't match up well with the Florida Gators. And then there's the Missouri Tigers, who are also on that top line. I think they proved that in the way that they handled Alabama. They can really score the basketball. They're underrated on the defensive end, and they have a head coach that gets the best out of his players. Coach Gates gets the absolute best out of his players. If it wasn't for Bruce Pearl and Auburn being 24-2 in the country, we might be looking at the National Coach of the Year in Missouri. On that second line, I have Alabama, Texas A&M, Tennessee, and Kentucky. These are teams that on any given day can beat anyone, but also could get upset early when it comes to March Madness. Alabama just doesn't have the top-end defense and the toughness that it takes to be a national championship team, and that's what separates them from those top 3 teams in my estimation in the league. Texas A&M is just too dependent on Wade Taylor IV. When he's on, when he's playing well, when he's tough to guard, and when he's knocking down jump shots, they're one of the best 8 to 10, 12 teams in the country. If you bottle them up, they're in trouble. And then you have Tennessee and Kentucky. Tennessee is well coached with Rick Barnes. They play tremendous defense. They're as tough as anybody in the nation, but they go on prolonged scoring droughts, and that can be a problem in March. And then the Kentucky Wildcats have been on a little bit of a heater lately. They play Alabama tonight. We'll see how that goes. They've dealt with a lot of adversity and a lot of injuries, but they have a lot of top 5 wins on their resume already this season. I think those 4 teams are on the second line, followed by the Mississippi schools. Next, you have Mississippi State and Ole Miss, 2 very talented, 2 very well-coached basketball teams, but also teams that tend to be up and down. And then on the 4th line, you have the Vanderbilt Commodores, Texas, Arkansas, Georgia, and Oklahoma. 4 teams that certainly could get hot and make a run, but 4 teams that are somewhere between the bubble and Sweet 16 teams. Then there's South Carolina and LSU at the very bottom. Those are the only 2 teams that, unless they win the SEC tournament, they are not sniffing the NCAA tournament this year. It's a deep league, but that's how I see it. That's how things are shaking out so far. I think Auburn, Florida, and Missouri are on the top line. A couple steps behind them are Alabama, Texas A&M, Tennessee, and Kentucky. A larger gap, and then Mississippi State and Ole Miss. A much larger gap than Vanderbilt, Texas, Arkansas, Georgia, and Oklahoma. And South Carolina and LSU bringing up the rear. That's all the news in the world of sports this week. Let's switch to this. The news in the world of the paranormal, where our first story takes us to some lady's floorboards is where we're going. Some lady's floorboards. She heard knocking beneath the floor of her home for weeks. Police make a disturbing discovery. For weeks, an elderly woman complained to her family about the strange knocking sounds coming from beneath her El Sereno home late at night. On Thursday, police made a terrifying discovery. The noises were no stray opossum or raccoon. They weren't an opossum. I used to know there's a difference between opossums and possums, and believe it or not, this one was probably a possum is what they're trying to reference, although that is not what was beneath her floorboards. I digress. But a man, reportedly naked, and authorities said living in the crawl space underneath the woman's home. The noises were usually late at night, so we just chalked it up to animals being in the house, the woman's son-in-law, Ricardo Silva, told NBC News. But on Thursday, the sounds were much louder than usual, prompting the family of the 93-year-old woman to phone the police, he said. The Los Angeles Police Department responded to a call at the 3600 block of Locke Avenue around 10:30 p.m. Thursday and discovered the man underneath the house, according to an LAPD spokesperson. The man refused to emerge from his underground dwelling, and officers called in a SWAT team to assist with the arrest, the spokesperson said. An hours-long standoff ensued before the man was taken into custody on suspicion of trespassing. And at this point, is it even really suspicion? I believe in innocent till proven guilty as much as the next man, but it seems that suspicion is not even on the table here. Police remained on scene until 5 a.m., he said. He refused to leave, Silva told NBC News. He was not scared of the police, of their dogs, and the first 2 attempts at tear gas did not fish him out. And that's a dedicated squatter, or crawler, I guess. Police identified the suspect as 27-year-old Isaac Betancourt, according to NBC News, which reported that he was without clothes when he was found. Betancourt was arrested by LAPD at 4:25 a.m. Friday and booked on a misdemeanor charge, according to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. He was released Saturday afternoon and scheduled to be arraigned on December the 6th. Betancourt was previously arrested July 2022, August and October of 2023, and this year in March and August, according to the LASD Inmate Information Center. So, this poor 93-year-old lady out in Los Angeles kept hearing these scratching and bumping noises in the middle of the night underneath the floorboards of her home and told her family about it. And they said, It's probably just a possum, maybe a raccoon, and it was a criminal. A full-blown criminal who, for some reason, had on no clothing. My guess is it is paraphernalia related. Had on no clothing and was living underneath the floorboards of her home in the crawl space. That is terrifying. That is as scary as it gets. And this is probably not the strangest thing that the LAPD had seen that week, but it's something that I would want no part of. And it's not exactly a ringing endorsement for the city of Los Angeles. Move here. Hey, you got people living under the floorboards of 93-year-old ladies' homes, and he was not even afraid of the SWAT team or the police dogs. The tear gas did not work on this young fella. This 27-year-old living under this 93-year-old woman's house. That's scary. That's petrifying. And if he was in Alabama, he probably wouldn't have made it out from underneath that house. I'm not saying. I'm just saying. And before you fix your lips to say that this is not a paranormal story, before you get those Twitter fingers ready, let me just challenge you to present a more horrific and terrifying scenario. Because this is petrifying. From floorboards in Los Angeles, we go to China for our next story. Because of course we do. Why wouldn't we? Chinese Ethereum holder spends $6.8 million to warn against mass mind control. A Chinese man transferred more than 2,553 Ether, worth $6.8 million, to various addresses, including a burn address and WikiLeaks donations, while claiming that Chinese entities and corporations are controlling people with mind control technology and devices. On February 17th, an Ether investor named Hu Lezi nailed the pronunciation. I know I did. Mr. Hu Lezi transferred 500 Ethereum to a null address associated with token burn events. This unusual transfer of funds was flagged by crypto intelligence and trading platform Arkham. Further investigation from Cointelegraph found that Lezi made 16 high-value transactions to various addresses, including WikiLeaks donations, Ethereum Foundation, and a few unlabeled and burn addresses. Each of the transactions contained on-chain messages in which Lezi claimed the Chinese companies and entities were using brain-computer weapons to persecute employees and turn their victims into puppets or complete slaves to the digital machine. Lezi described himself as a computer programmer who recently realized he had been monitored and manipulated his entire life. The people controlling his mind had intensified their harm toward him since that realization, he claimed. Among other things, he specifically blamed Quande Investments' Chinese CEOs, Fen Jin and Zhu Yuzi, accusing them of using brain-computer weapons to persecute employees. Lezi claimed that the CEOs' minds were also controlled by the same technology. The transfers began on February 10th and were spaced out until February 17th, many with a common message. There's a new mode of crime in which the victim is gradually deprived of his senses of desire until he becomes a complete slave to the digital machine, and if one day I become a victim of the final stage, I will leave the world. In total, Lezi gave away 2,553.25 Ethereum to highlight his message. It had a market value of about $6.86 million as of February 18th. So, this is an interesting story. This guy burned $6.8 million just to draw attention to the message that he was trying to get out to the world. And that message was that China has mind control technology and that their businesses, especially the one that he's been dealing with, are using it to monitor, control, and deprive citizens of their senses until they are slaves to the digital machine. Yikes. This might be more terrifying, if true, than the 27-year-old underneath the floorboards of the home in California. If you've listened to the show before, you know that I will say, show me the evidence. It's certainly fascinating that this guy is willing to light $6.8 million on fire. How much more does he have? What is he worth? What is his story? Show me the evidence. I need something more here than just your word. Just in reading his message to the world, it's easy to write this guy off and say that he sounds like he's out of touch with reality. Is it impossible that China has such technology? I don't know that it is. Stranger things have been alleged. And when somebody is willing to go through such lengths to get somebody to pay attention and to listen, it certainly makes your ears perk up. It certainly makes you wonder, what is the real story? What is the rest of the story? What is it that is going on here? But I need to see some evidence. And I need a little bit of investigative journalism to find out who this guy is and what he's all about. We know that Elon Musk, who allegedly is the richest man in the world, has several human beings walking around with chips in their brain in the form of Neuralink. And they use that technology to be able to do things that they cannot do on their own because they are paraplegics, and that sounds wonderful. And I support that use of certain technology. But could something similar be weaponized? Could it be used to do what this man is alleging? That's the fear. That is the drawback. And it's a big one. What do you make of this story? Do you think it's a bunch of nonsense? Do you put any stock into it? Do you think such technology even exists? And if so, is China the place that you would find it? Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Get at us on Twitter at intheshed4. Let me know your opinion. From Chinese mind control, we go to an iPhone app for our next story. Naturally, putting the Ghost Hunting Tools app to the test in 2 different historic locations. Ghost Hunting Tools is a popular paranormal app, but it comes with a disclaimer. It's stated on the App Store that both Android and iPhone versions are intended for entertainment purposes only and do not provide true ghost hunting functionality. But despite this disclaimer, the app still manages to spit out some uncannily fitting results. So if there's no ghost hunting functionality at play here, then what's really going on? To put the app to the test, I used the Android version, which is called Ghost Hunting Tools. Even the app's title tells you it's not real. The disclaimer for the Android version reads, "This application is intended for entertainment purposes and simulates a ghost hunting tool." The app works by spewing out random words, mimicking other ghost hunting tools that claim that these words are communication with spirits. Even though the developer of this app has made it clear that the app is not real, many of the words do seem very fitting, and despite the disclaimer, a scroll through the comments shows that many users are still convinced it's real. One comment reads, "Even though it says simulator, it's real. I've had experiences, and the contact I've had with one particular spirit has saved my life countless times." Another user wrote, "Says it's just a simulation and for entertainment, but man, I don't know." The comments continue, "Oddly legit despite it saying it's a simulation," and "I highly, highly, highly doubt it's just simulated." To put the app to the test, I decided to take it to 2 different historic locations, both of which have local ghost stories. However, I didn't want to test if the app worked or not, as the developer has already made this clear. I simply wanted to understand why its simulated responses seemed so accurate. So instead of actually using the app at each of the locations, I recorded an hour of its output and played back the exact same recording in real time at both locations. This meant that there's no way the app could be responding to its surroundings because all the words were pre-generated elsewhere. By using the same recorded set of words at 2 locations, we get an idea of how easily the words generated by the app can fit at different times and in different places. A week before I went out to try the experiment, I put my phone down on a flat surface in a quiet room at home. I started the app running and set my phone to record on the screen. I left the app running for an hour in this state, and this resulted in an hour-long video of the app in use. The next step is to go out and instead of using the app itself, I'll play back the same 1-hour recording of the app at each of the locations I visit. That way I know the atmospheric conditions of the location cannot be affecting the app, but more importantly I can see how relevant the words shown over an hour are to 2 totally different locations. Location 1, Bradford-on-Avon, Wiltshire. The first place I took the experiment to was the historic town of Bradford-on-Avon near Bath. I went for an hour-long walk around the town while playing back the recording of the app on my phone. Remember, the words that pop up were randomly shown by the app more than a week earlier and can't have anything to do with this location, but how many will fit and how accurate will it be? Well, there were some pretty good matches. The app had spewed out 52 words in total, so almost 1 per minute. In the busiest part of the town, while surrounded by locals and visitors who sat in the sun, the app said people. A little later, I crossed the river on a bridge near the town hall, and the word catch appeared. Could this relate to fishing? As I walked towards a major road junction in the center of the town, the word corner flashed on the screen. Later, as I walked up the main road in the direction of one of the town's underground quarries, the app said mine. And that's bizarre. That is a weird coincidence. I digress. So in an hour, there were 4 hits on the app. Not bad considering the words were selected a week before my visit to the town. Location 2, Derbyshire. Next, I went to Eyam in Derbyshire, a village famous for its connection to the plague. In an act of self-sacrifice, the villagers quarantined themselves in order to stop the spread of the deadly disease. I once again went for an hour-long walk around the village while playing back the exact same hour-long recording of the app on my phone. 4 of the pre-selected words had matched my last location, but how would the recording relate to Eyam? The word poisoned came up. Could this be a reference to the plague? The best match to the plague occurred when I was at the famous plague cottage and the word catch came up on the screen. The word corner also had a potential match in Eyam, as I admired and commented on the corner of the garden of Rose Cottage where a little seating area stood, and that word appeared on the screen. Later the word 6 popped up. This could be significant as the villagers famously drilled 6 holes into the top of the boundary stone where they inserted money to pay the neighboring villages for food during the outbreak. 6 was also the number of children that survivor Elizabeth Hancock lost and buried. I crossed over the road to a small village green where some stocks stood. I don't think these were original, but perhaps they marked the site where stocks might have once stood. At this point, the app said fatal. This initially seemed linked, but stocks weren't usually fatal. However, they were a form of punishment as criminals would have been restrained by their ankles or wrists, so pretty brutal, even if not fatal. During an hour-long walk around Bradford-on-Avon, there were 4 hits on the app. In Eyam, there was 4 or 5 matches. Interestingly, the word catch fit in both locations, which just goes to show how easy it is to associate the words preloaded into the app with your surroundings. In Bradford-on-Avon, catch could have related to fishing in the river, while it fit with the Black Death in Eyam. I think 4 hits per location is pretty good, and the level of success that a ghost hunter using the app might get excited about, despite the fact that 90% of the words didn't have any connection to the locations at all. It should also be remembered that the same list of words was used in both of the towns, and that the list was generated by the app miles away and weeks before, so there's no way the app could have selected these words through a paranormal means. These words do sometimes seem too good to be coincidental, leaving skeptics in the paranormal field questioning whether the app might listen to your conversation or use GPS location information to throw up relevant words, but this simple experiment of using the app in isolation and applying the results to 2 locations shows the technical trickery isn't actually necessary to fool the user into believing the app really works. All you need is a well-thought-out list of words preloaded into the app, which will be fitting to the type of location where ghost hunters will use this sort of app. While Ghost Hunting Tools makes it clear that its results are simulated, most other similar apps claim to be real paranormal apps. This experiment doesn't prove that all apps are fake, but it does highlight how much of a role chance and coincidence have in causing us to believe that the words generated fit our surroundings. So, I thought this was a fairly well done experiment. I know some people that do this sort of thing that swear by these apps and say that they are a way to get in touch with those who have passed on, with spirits that linger, and others who say that they are complete and utter nonsense. This guy, I think, did a thorough job of debunking this app, of showing that it's little more than a software that generates words that could mean something in most situations, and in a lot of places where people go ghost hunting. I know for me, I don't want any part of speaking to those who have passed on. Trying to communicate with spirits, hey, that's a no-no for me. I'm out on that one, dog. I don't want any part of it. I don't see the benefit in it. I'm not interested. You're free to have a different opinion, but that's where I stand. And that's how I feel. But I still thought that this was interesting. I thought that the author of the article had some good controls in place and did a good job of showing that this app is just a simulation. It's LARPing. It's a video game. It's a word generator, is what it is. Does that mean that if there are spirits out there to be communicated with, that they could not make use of those words at a certain time to communicate with you or point you in a certain direction? Hey, maybe they could. But even so, I wouldn't want to be a part of it. I wouldn't have a hand in it. I thought this article was interesting. From a ghost hunting app, we go to the Unsolved for our last story this week. The JonBenet Ramsey full story, unraveling the dark secrets behind America's most infamous murder. The tragic murder of JonBenet Ramsey on December 26, 1996 shocked the nation and remains one of America's most infamous unsolved cases. The 6-year-old beauty queen was found dead in the basement of her family's Boulder, Colorado home just hours after being reported missing. Her death was ruled a homicide with evidence of a skull fracture and strangulation. A mysterious ransom note demanding $118,000 for JonBenet's safe return was discovered by her mother, Patsy Ramsey, early that morning. The note's unusual contents and length raised suspicions from the start. Police initially focused on JonBenet's parents as the primary suspects, but DNA evidence later seemed to point to an unidentified male intruder. Over the years, numerous theories have emerged about who killed JonBenet Ramsey. Despite extensive investigations and public interest, the case remains open. The murder of this young child continues to captivate the public, spawning countless books, documentaries, and renewed calls for justice decades later. The JonBenet Ramsey case began on December 26, 1996 in Boulder, Colorado. It started with a missing child report and quickly escalated into a high-profile murder investigation that captured national attention. On December 25, 1996, the Ramsey family celebrated Christmas at their home in Boulder. JonBenet, a 6-year-old beauty queen contestant, spent the day with her parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, and her 9-year-old brother, Burke. The following morning, Patsy Ramsey woke up early to prepare for a trip. She discovered her daughter was missing from her bed. A frantic search of the house ensued. The family contacted police reporting JonBenet as missing. Officers arrived at the Ramsey home to begin their investigation. A 3-page ransom note was found on the kitchen staircase. It demanded $118,000 for JonBenet's safe return, coincidentally close to John Ramsey's recent bonus amount. The note claimed to be from a small foreign faction and contained specific threats against JonBenet if the family contacted authorities. Despite the note's instructions, police were called and arrived at the scene. They began a preliminary search of the house but did not conduct a thorough investigation initially. About 8 hours after the initial discovery, John Ramsey found JonBenet's body in the basement wine cellar. This tragic turn of events transformed the case from a kidnapping to a murder investigation. JonBenet Patricia Ramsey was a young American child beauty queen whose life and tragic death captivated national attention. Born into a wealthy family, she gained recognition for her participation in beauty pageants before her untimely passing at the age of 6. JonBenet Ramsey was born on August 6, 1990 in Atlanta, Georgia. Her father, John Ramsey, was a successful businessman, while her mother, Patsy Ramsey, was former Miss West Virginia. The family lived in Boulder, Colorado, where JonBenet spent most of her short life. From an early age, JonBenet participated in children's beauty pageants. She won several titles, including Little Miss Colorado and National Tiny Miss Beauty. Her performances in these contests often included singing, dancing, and modeling. JonBenet's involvement in beauty pageants was a significant part of her public image. She wore elaborate costumes, makeup, and hairstyles during competitions, which some critics found controversial for a child of her age. On December 26, 1996, JonBenet was found dead in her family's home. The circumstances surrounding her death remain unsolved, turning her case into one of America's most infamous unsolved crimes. The investigation into JonBenet Ramsey's murder began immediately after her body was discovered. Police efforts, parental involvement, and crime scene analysis formed key components of the initial probe. The Boulder Police Department responded to the Ramsey home on December 26, 1996. Officers secured the scene and began collecting evidence. Detective Linda Arndt was among the first to arrive, staying with the family throughout the day. The police faced challenges from the start. Many people had been in and out of the house, potentially contaminating the crime scene. This complicated evidence collection and preservation efforts. Investigators interviewed family members and friends. They also canvassed the neighborhood for potential witnesses or suspicious activity. The department faced criticism for not immediately separating John and Patsy Ramsey for questioning. John and Patsy Ramsey cooperated with police in the initial stages of the investigation. They provided statements and allowed searches of their home. Patsy Ramsey reported finding a ransom note demanding $118,000 for JonBenet's return. This led to initial confusion about whether it was a kidnapping or a murder case. John Ramsey discovered JonBenet's body in the basement during a search requested by police. This raised questions about why earlier searches had not found her. The Ramseys' behavior came under scrutiny. Some investigators found their demeanor suspicious, while others saw it as normal grief reactions. Forensic teams meticulously examined the Ramsey home. They collected DNA samples, fingerprints, and other physical evidence. Key findings included a fractured skull and signs of strangulation on JonBenet's body, duct tape over her mouth, a garrote made from cord and a paintbrush handle, unidentified DNA on her underwear and leggings. Investigators noted signs of forced entry were absent. This led to speculation about an inside job. The ransom note, unusually long for such documents, became a focal point of the investigation. The basement window showed possible signs of disturbance, but its significance remained unclear. Crime scene technicians faced challenges due to the number of people who had been in and out of the house before and after JonBenet's body was found. The autopsy and forensic analysis of JonBenet Ramsey's body revealed crucial details about her death. Key findings included evidence of strangulation, sexual assault, and DNA traces from an unknown male contributor. Dr. John Meyer conducted the autopsy on December 27, 1996. He determined the cause of death as asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. The autopsy revealed a skull fracture measuring 8.5 inches long. A garrote made from a cord and a broken paintbrush handle were found around JonBenet's neck. Petechial hemorrhages indicating strangulation occurred while she was still alive. Toxicology tests showed no drugs or alcohol in her system. Undigested pineapple was found in her stomach, suggesting she had eaten shortly before her death. The autopsy uncovered signs of sexual assault. There was blood in JonBenet's underwear and evidence of trauma. Abrasions and cellular debris were found inside of her. These findings led investigators to suspect sexual abuse, either acute or chronic. Some experts argued the injuries could have resulted from prior abuse, while others maintained they occurred during the attack. The presence of sexual assault complicated the investigation and raised questions about potential motive for the crime. DNA analysis played a crucial role in the investigation. Male DNA was found in JonBenet's underwear and under her fingernails. The DNA did not match any family members or known suspects. In 2008, advanced DNA testing techniques identified genetic markers from an unknown male on JonBenet's clothing. This evidence led to the exoneration of the Ramsey family. The unidentified DNA remains a key focus of the ongoing investigation. It has been entered into the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS, in hopes of finding a match and identifying the perpetrator. The JonBenet Ramsey case has sparked intense public fascination and extensive media coverage even at the time. The tragic murder of the young beauty queen captivated audiences nationwide, leading to widespread speculation and scrutiny. The Ramsey case dominated headlines for years. Major news outlets provided round-the-clock coverage, dissecting every detail of the investigation. Television specials, documentaries, and books explored various theories about the crime. Tabloids sensationalized the story, often publishing unverified information and fueling public speculation. The media's focus on the family, particularly JonBenet's parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, intensified scrutiny and suspicion. Many journalists criticized the Boulder Police Department's handling of the case, highlighting perceived missteps in the initial investigation. This criticism further fueled public interest and debate about the unsolved murder. JonBenet's participation in child beauty pageants became a focal point of media attention. Photos and videos of her performances circulated widely, sparking debates about the appropriateness of such contests for young children. Critics argued that the pageants sexualized children, while supporters defended them as harmless fun. The public's fascination with JonBenet's pageant life added a layer of complexity to the case's media narrative. The Ramsey family's wealth and social status also played a role in shaping public perception. Their affluent lifestyle and seemingly picture-perfect image contrasted sharply with the brutal crime, fueling further speculation and interest. The intense media coverage had significant effects on the investigation. Constant public scrutiny pressured law enforcement to produce results quickly, potentially compromising thorough investigative procedures. Leaks to the press complicated efforts to maintain the integrity of the case also. False leads and unsubstantiated theories circulated widely, diverting attention and resources from more credible avenues of investigation. The media frenzy also affected the Ramsey family directly. They face intense public scrutiny and accusations, leading them to hire legal representation and limit their interaction with the press and with investigators. Recent documentaries and streaming series have reignited interest in the case, introducing new generations to the unsolved mystery and sparking fresh debates about the investigation's handling. The JonBenet Ramsey case generated numerous suspects and persons of interest over the years. Investigators pursued various leads and theories from family members to potential intruders. John and Patsy Ramsey, JonBenet's parents, were among the first suspects. Police focused on them due to their presence in the house during the crime. Investigators conducted extensive handwriting analysis on the ransom note found at the scene. Experts compared Patsy's handwriting to the note, with some finding similarities. However, results were inconclusive and no charges were filed against the Ramseys. Other initial suspects included family friend Bill McReynolds, who played Santa Claus at the Ramsey home, and former housekeeper Linda Hoffman Pugh. In 2006, John Mark Carr confessed to JonBenet's murder, creating a media frenzy. Carr, a former schoolteacher, provided detailed accounts of the crime. Authorities arrested Carr in Thailand and extradited him to the United States. However, DNA evidence did not match Carr to the crime scene. Prosecutors dropped charges against Carr, deeming his confession false. This development highlighted the challenges of high-profile cases that attract unreliable confessions. The intruder theory gained attraction as an alternative to family involvement. Supporters pointed to evidence of forced entry and unidentified DNA found on JonBenet's clothing. Investigators explored several potential intruder suspects. Gary Oliva, a convicted pedophile living near the Ramsey home. Michael Helgoth, a local man who died by suicide shortly after the murder. Glenn Meyer, a neighbor who reportedly watched the Ramsey house. Despite extensive investigation, none of these leads produced conclusive evidence linking them to the crime. The case remains unsolved, with new suspects and theories emerging periodically. Recent developments in forensic science and investigative techniques have breathed new life into the JonBenet Ramsey case. These advancements offer hope for uncovering crucial evidence that may lead to solving this decades-old mystery. Touch DNA analysis has emerged as a powerful tool in the JonBenet Ramsey investigation. This technique can detect minute traces of DNA left behind from skin cells, even after brief contact with an object. Investigators have applied touch DNA analysis to evidence from the crime scene, including the ransom note in JonBenet's clothing. The technology allows for the extraction of DNA profiles from previously untestable samples. This has led to the discovery of new genetic information that was not available during the initial investigation. Forensic experts are now working to compare these newly obtained DNA profiles with potential suspects. Law enforcement agencies have implemented advanced cold case techniques to reinvigorate the investigation. These methods include digitizing and reanalyzing old case files, utilizing artificial intelligence to identify patterns in evidence, and conducting interviews with witnesses using cognitive recall techniques. New information has also come to light, including an alleged confession from an individual claiming involvement in the crime. Investigators are carefully evaluating this claim alongside other leads. The Boulder Police Department has partnered with specialized forensic labs to apply cutting-edge DNA analysis methods. These efforts aim to extract more information from existing evidence and potentially identify new suspects. The JonBenet Ramsey case involved complex legal actions and public statements by her parents. John and Patsy Ramsey faced intense scrutiny but were never formally charged with their daughter's murder. The Ramseys filed several defamation lawsuits against media outlets and individuals who accused them of involvement in JonBenet's death. In 2003, they sued Fox News for a story implying their son Burke was the killer. The case was settled out of court. John and Patsy also took legal action against former Boulder Police Detective Steve Thomas, who wrote a book accusing Patsy of the murder. This suit was settled in 2002, with Thomas retracting his allegations. A lawsuit against CBS for a 2016 documentary suggesting Burke's involvement was also settled in 2019. John and Patsy Ramsey consistently maintained their innocence. They wrote The Death of Innocence in 2000, detailing their version of events and criticizing the police investigation. Patsy appeared on numerous talk shows to defend the family. John continued to speak out after Patsy's death in 2006, giving interviews and pushing for new DNA testing. The Ramseys advocated for the release of grand jury documents, which occurred in 2013. These revealed that the grand jury had voted to indict them, but the district attorney declined to file charges due to insufficient evidence. The pursuit of justice in the JonBenet Ramsey case remains active. Multiple parties continue their efforts to uncover new evidence and re-examine existing information using advanced techniques. Investigators employ cutting-edge forensic technologies to analyze evidence from the crime scene. DNA testing methods have advanced significantly since 1996, allowing for more detailed genetic profiles. Experts in various fields collaborate to review the case files. Forensic psychologists create updated offender profiles. Linguistic analysis scrutinizes the ransom note for new insights. Cold case specialists apply fresh perspectives to the investigation. They reassess the witness statements and timeline using modern investigative techniques. The Boulder County District Attorney's Office maintains an open investigation into JonBenet's murder. They periodically review case materials and follow up on new leads. The office coordinates with other law enforcement agencies to share information and resources. They've expressed commitment to solving the case and bringing the perpetrator to justice. Prosecutors evaluate potential legal strategies as new evidence emerges. They consider advancements in forensic science that could strengthen a future case. Private investigators and amateur sleuths continue to examine the case independently. Online forums and social media groups discuss theories and analyze publicly available information. John Ramsey, JonBenet's father, advocates for further investigation to this day. He's petitioned for the release of case files and DNA testing of unexamined evidence. Documentary filmmakers and true crime authors revisit the case, sometimes uncovering new details. Their work keeps public interest alive and may generate fresh leads for investigators in the future. The JonBenet Ramsey case profoundly shaped true crime media and sparked debates about child pageants. It became a cultural touchstone that continues to captivate public interest decades later. The Ramsey case helped fuel the true crime boom in media. Numerous books, podcasts, and TV specials have examined the murder. Netflix released a docuseries casting JonBenet in 2017, exploring the cultural obsession with the case. Cold Case: Who Killed JonBenet Ramsey aired in 2022, revisiting evidence with new technology. These productions often feature interviews with key figures like photographer Randy Simons. The ongoing fascination demonstrates the case's lasting impact on true crime storytelling. It remains a prime example of an unsolved mystery that captivates audiences, even today. So, what happened to JonBenet Ramsey? Who was responsible for snuffing out the life of this innocent little child? My apologies for the repetitiveness of the article that I just read. I do not read them ahead of time. I react in live time with you, my people, my babies, my tools. This is something that I have been interested in for a long time, and if you had asked me 3 weeks ago, I would have told you that most likely JonBenet's family was involved in some way. Either she was killed accidentally and they covered it up, there was some type of involvement by one or both of her parents or her younger brother. Because it's a strange case. Why, after your child turns up missing, do you immediately invite people over to your home after calling the police? How did you not find her body sooner? As you would think, searching the home would be the first thing that you do. Why did the ransom note say $118,000, which was very close to the amount that her father had received in a bonus at work earlier that year? Why had she consumed pineapple very close to the time of her death that happened in the middle of the night? There's a lot of weird factors here, but right here today, I no longer believe that John or Patsy Ramsey or her brother Burke had anything to do with this murder or had any knowledge of it whatsoever. And I think that's what the evidence shows. Unfortunately, I think that the Boulder Police Department mishandled this case enormously from the start. They didn't treat the house like a crime scene. They didn't do a thorough search of the house to find her to begin with. The handwriting on the note was in fact not a match for that of Patsy Ramsey. They leaked things to the press that turned out not to be true later on. They didn't have a homicide investigator with any experience on the case at all. They stonewalled the family later and did not provide information that could have led to the capture of the perpetrator. They honed in on the mom and dad, and they never fixed their gaze anywhere else. I don't think with the garrote that was made and applied to this young lady that her 9-year-old brother is a possible suspect at all. The private investigator that spent years of his life trying to figure out and solve this case believed that there was an intruder that came through the basement window, that hid in the house for hours, abducted this girl, and then unfortunately some things happened that resulted in her loss of life. And then in a panic, this perpetrator wrote this ransom note and left it and took off. And I think that that's probably what happened. The worst part of all is that they have so much DNA, and yet they haven't found the murderer. In 1996, DNA was a new thing, and there's no doubt that because of the lack of experience on the crime scene, that even that evidence was mishandled. There are some items from the crime scene that still to this day have not been tested for DNA. And I think that it is a strong possibility and even likelihood that the killer has already had his DNA tested, and they did not find a match because the DNA samples that they got were accidentally corrupted. The Boulder Police Department to this day swears that they want to solve this crime, but they don't put forth the effort. They're too afraid to look bad. They won't turn over the tests that they've already run and the items for new testing that they have in evidence. Why? Why not get this crime solved? If you are the governor of Colorado, why not insist that everything be turned over? What they need to do is have a new DNA expert build a new profile based on the evidence that they have, do some new testing, run it through CODIS, and see if you have a hit. Test everything again against every DNA sample that has been brought forth from potential suspects in this case, and my guess is that you might just find the culprit. What do I know? I'm just a man in the backyard of his home in Alabama on a Friday morning, but hey, that's what I think. I don't think it was the parents. I don't think it was the little brother. I think that they were shocked and hurting family members who lost someone that they cared about and loved very much. I think the true perpetrator was somebody who was fixated on JonBenet, somebody maybe who had been watching the family or who attended pageants, somebody who had a tertiary connection to the family or to their home or to their neighborhood, that took advantage of a lack of security and awareness in a very large home and did the unthinkable. What do you think? Why has this crime remained unsolved for so long? Who do you think is guilty of the murder of JonBenet Ramsey? Do you agree with my assertion and conclusion? Do you have a different suspect in mind entirely? Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Get at us on Twitter at intheshed4 and let me know. I think DNA holds the key to solving this crime. I see no reason why it cannot be solved. And my hope is that in the near future, while John Ramsey is still alive, that it will be. That's all for this week. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I can't either. It's back in the house and out of the shed for me. Thanks again for listening to episode 85. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, and review. It really does help. If you have any paranormal experiences, opinions about sports or politics that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air. Look for us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Pandora, the Good Pods app, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure to follow us on X at InTheShed4 and subscribe to our YouTube channel at In the Shed with Wes Anderson 6670. Tune in again next week when we'll hit the headlines, talk some sports, and dive into one of Alabama's oldest legends together, the story of Hug and Molly. This has been In the Shed with Wes Anderson, the best news show in the land covering politics, sports, and the paranormal. Have an adventurous and fulfilling weekend. I'll catch you tools later. Peace out, Boy Scouts. Meemaw, we made it!
We sure did.